It's, you know what? It's possible.
It's all possible, but we're live, so we're not going to talk about it. Hi, welcome to the Survivor New York Blood vs. Water recap podcast. I'm Naomi Calhoun, the host with the least. Here joining me are three of my favorite people. We're going to have an awesome time talking about the 11th episode of Survivor New York. First and foremost, the one who started it all. We have Chris Lord with us. Chris, what's going on? How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here with the legendary host of Survivor Brooklyn South, George. And I think yes, you're amazing. Obviously, you know that. And then one of the most iconic, like, Survivor characters I've ever seen, Hoy, is with us. I'm so excited. I have to say, of anybody in this cast, he was the one I was so excited for because I was like, oh my God, I have a Harvard grad applying to my show. It's so cool. So excited.
I mean, you just took the words right out of my mouth. We have the founder and host of Survivor Brooklyn South, somebody who both told me he had an idol and then got my ass voted out. George Nicolaitis. George, what's going on?
I will never live that down. Everything's great. I'm so happy to be here. So happy to be watching this fantastic season and watching Chris's vision come to life and getting my Survivor fix, which has been missing from all our lives. And this has really been a godsend because, wow, what a great season. What a great cast. What amazing challenges. And Hoy, who really showed what he could do out there, was a great contender and people were afraid of him. And I'm honored to be on this panel with him. Sad that you were voted out for this to happen, but, you know, happy to meet you in person. Well, in person.
Yeah, not really, but we are joined by the fabulous Hoy, the person I probably made the most gifts of in general. Hoy, how's it going?
Hello. Well, first of all, thank you for all three of you for doing what you do. I think as a Survivor fan myself, it's so nice to see other fans put pen to the paper and pedal to the metal to actually produce games like this for fans like me. So I appreciate all of the passion and the fandom that goes into what you guys do. I've been good. I've been really, really good. I'm thankful to be healthy and to be sane. My biggest complaint these days is that I'm just really bored. It could be better, it could be worse. But by and large, it's been a pretty quiet year, personally. Most recently, I did Thanksgiving here locally, New York, for the first time, so I didn't go home. But met up with a couple of friends, socially distant. So I'm trying to round out the year with some festivities and some joy in a otherwise pretty chaotic year.
Well, and I know that you've been crushing it in the Sequesterverse a little bit. You've been playing these games, and it's been such a treat to get to watch you sort of be the gamer that I always knew you were. And now we get to see it sort of brought to life and then ultimately snuffed out. Chris, to start us off, first of all, hi, Louie. Hello. Chris,
hi, Louie.
What is your very first question for Hoy? What are we going to talk about?
So I kind of want to bring it back to when we interviewed Hong. We asked Hong, like, what did Hoy think of, like, watching himself? And her response was funny to me. It was like, Hoy was just talking about how he didn't like himself on camera or how he looked. And I was like, he looks really good. I thought you have a great smile. You have great hair. I was just like, what does this guy see? So, like, I just want to know, how is it watching yourself, you know, be on YouTube, playing this game, hearing your voice, seeing your mannerisms? Like, how was that for you?
It was fascinating, truly eye-opening. I think in my normal life, certainly my professional life, I am much more thoughtful and much more collected and much more prepared with what I show up with. And even social settings, even when I'm like playing games with friends, it's generally much more controlled and surgical with what I say. And looking at myself at this season, I was like, oh, what the hell was I doing? I looked crazy. Like I looked at myself.
You were unraveling out there after the merge. It was clear. But the thing about you were you started off. You were in charge. It seemed like you were going to go all the way to the end with Pearl, but you became a threat. But you. Too funny. Oh, we got a message from Anessa.
Love you, Anessa.
I would say the other person who is about to begin their unraveling, Anessa, is here. I think what I love about the Purple Tribe is you guys care so much about the game that you just start like your brain. I mean, when you are voted out in your final words, your brain is just going a mile a minute, and you care so much about what's happened that you can't turn it off. And I love that because I'm not that kind of person. Like when I got voted out, I'm like, all right, they got me, fine. I'm gonna go get a beer. Let's do this. But you were just like still going. And that's what I loved about you. And I especially love about you as a jury member too, is that you have such a deep care for the game and the care for the moves that people are making. So it's very fun. And I'm so glad that you're even at this point, and that we've got to spend this time with you. Which is like such a treat.
Yeah. And just to add a little more to that, I think that's right. I think what people are seeing on camera, in terms of the inner thinking, that's certainly me. I think in a game and in this setting, it all just kind of had to manifest itself externally, whereas typically I have
control,
a little different way of presenting that information.
It's jarring to see yourself in a vulnerable state, being paranoid. You don't really see yourself like that in your everyday life. And when you are filmed or photographed, you're usually posing or know that it's happening. But here, you're basically, you're showing your guts to the camera because you're fighting for your life, and that's what makes the show riveting, and that's what makes the game riveting. And that's what made you riveting as a player, because you really put it out there. And, you were interesting to watch, but that also translates to he's a threat. Let's get him out. He's dangerous. And that's exactly what happened to you.
Yeah. I'd love to talk a little bit about that. Maybe that's a question at some point, but I think that was one of my blind spots. If I were to kind of reassess and examine some of the things that I could have done differently. I think I misjudged people's perception of me. I think I leaned into this idea that I was a decoy vote. I was kind of a fake threat, compounded by the fact that I felt like there were so much more obvious threats around me, like a Louis, like an Anessa, like a Mark. Like anyone in yellow at this point, basically, I got into a false sense of security that I'm safe. Like there are such bigger threats around me, much more likable. Not actually, but the perception. I think I was kind of put in a tough situation at the merge where I was the vote. So it was very difficult for me socially to kind of make friends now with Eddie, or make friends now with Susan, or make friends now with Sarah, now that they've all literally voted for me. So I think it became very like, not going to be friends with you. You're probably not going to like me for the rest of this post-merge game, because I got to do what I got to do now to stay alive. But anyways, that's all to say. The concept of threats, I think when and if I play again, if and when I play again, I think that's a learning that I'm going to take with me, how to control perceptions of threats a little bit better. And also, like, for myself, like, understand who the threats are, who other people think the threats are.
Inessa says she thinks that she has her shit together more in real life as well. Although Louis says he doesn't have his shit together in any aspect of his life. I think it's true.
I'm going to tell you something about Louis. I worked with Louis on crew for the last game for 4.
Yep.
And Louis, sweet kid, very quiet, unassuming. Because we were all so busy doing the, shooting the game and doing everything, I didn't really get a chance to know him. But, I walked away. Oh, that was a nice kid. It was great to meet him. Watching him play, I'm like, where was this kid that whole weekend? I was like, it was like a completely different personality. It's really amazing to watch. I really hope he slides all the way to the end. I'm enjoying his game for sure.
Me too.
Well,
I want to talk about the immunity challenge. Like starting the episode. Um, so the last couple episodes, if you look at it, the person who went home got second place in the immunity challenge. And I thought it was sort of interesting that it followed suit in this episode, Hoy. And I want to say there was some sort of confessional where you said that you could have given it a little bit more and you think you could have won the challenge, but you didn't feel like you needed it. So what was going through your mind? Like in that challenge, it's you versus Eddie. You could easily win this challenge, but did you not win because like, hey, maybe I'd be seen as a bigger threat if I win this? Like, what was going through your mind?
It was a combination of two things. I think really the driving thing was I was so sure that Susan was going. And that was my belief. Susan was going, everyone was on board with that. And so that was one piece of it. And then throughout the entire game, even at the very beginning, I tried to make it very clear that I am not in any way like a challenge threat. So I wanted to control a little bit of that piece. So I just told people I hate puzzles. I don't know how to do puzzles. I love puzzles. Like I literally do like an app like on my phone every single day.
yeah.
Just stick a puzzle on me, and like especially logical puzzles. Like I love those.
Harvard.
Yeah, and then also physically, like I'm taller. I like to run. And I'm competitive, and I typically like when I do something, I want to win, and so I came into the game, and part of my thing was I need to dumb everything down, I need to dull everything down, I need to just kind of be a number, kind of be more here because like you like talking to me than anything else, and so that factored into it a little bit as well. But I would say probably for that, like I felt pretty comfortable that Susan was going home, and that winning immunity really would have only put more of a target on my back, especially because there was conversations about getting people like Eddie and Mark out because they're such challenge beasts.
Right. And I think the other thing is letting Eddie win immunity has its own benefits, right? Because you just go, oh, look at Eddie, so strong. Let's vote him out next. Like, you know, like you just kind of go, get under that bus, Eddie, if he wins another challenge, if he wins another immunity. And so that's what I thought was, at the very least, is a good move to say, let's let Eddie win so that his target, you know, swells 5 times the size. But I think the other side of it is like when somebody puts your name out as a decoy, it's very interesting. Sometimes it's just the person that like people think would likely go home. But other times when you make a decoy, it's the person you are okay with losing. And I think that's kind of what happened to you is the more that your name kept being out there, the more that people thought, well, I'm okay with losing Hoy. And then it just spiraled out of control for you, which is such a shame, especially considering, and this is something I really wanted to talk about, in like 2 episodes prior, it's you, Sam, and Gary to the end. And then all of a sudden, they're fine with losing you. Was that a surprise in the moment? And have you guys ever even talked about that or thought about it a little further?
As a group, no. I've talked a little bit to Gary about it. And well, let me kind of talk through the first part of that question, which is, I think, again, back to the understanding and perceiving threats a little bit better and how they're used, whether it's to get someone out because they're afraid of them, or to your point, which is, are they just using me as a decoy, painting me as a threat because they really don't need me? At that point in the game, I felt I was kind of a cat with 9 lives. I'd already been saved by Louis idol. And truly, like, I felt like I had no leverage anyway. I had very little leverage, especially compared to my closest allies, Anessa and Louis. And so I had to make a plan. I knew the moment that I was saved, that Louis had to go, that Anessa had to go. There were kind of 2 driving. I'm kind of meandering a little bit, but
you literally tell us everything you're thinking of.
Yeah. So I think one of the driving forces post-merge that I'm not sure is coming out as much, but I definitely remember it, is that there was a purple and a yellow. I think that is still very much the case watching it, but I think it was even more so as a player playing it. And what I mean by that is I didn't have my loved one. I went into the merge, and the first vote at the merge was essentially a purple-yellow deadlock, the exact same play by the exact same tribes with the exact same advantages. And I really think that set the tone for the rest of the post-merge game. So we do see conversations, with purple and yellow kind of crossing a little bit. But I think Anessa and Louis did a really good job of kind of pulling Eddie and Mark into our voting block. But I still felt one of the driving forces throughout the game was there was still always a potential that yellow could just gel back together. There was still always the potential of purple kind of sticking together. And so working under those assumptions, it was very difficult for me to really forge any real relationships or alliances with yellow. So that was one piece of it. And so in looking at Anessa and to another thing, it also felt that the jury is very yellow favoring. Currently, before me that discovered there's 4 yellow on the jury and 1 purple. And so in my mind, any yellow that makes it to the end is going to win. Given that I felt like everyone kind of experienced that yellow versus purple. So I really felt that if any yellow made it to the end, that the yellow feeling of the underdog, you survived your like purple's onslaught and you got it to the end, you're gonna have my vote. And so in my mind, no yellow could make it to the end. They were the biggest threats. And then that left the 5 purple. And of the 5 purple, I thought to myself, Anessa and Louis have the most leverage. They have the most options. They have the most opportunities to play kind of a very interesting, flashy game because they have Eddie and because they have Mark. And so they have a +1 vote over the 3. And that's how I came to the 3, which is I need to figure out how to lock in some kind of power. I need some kind of leverage. So I need to convince Gary and Sam that the best bet is for the 3 of us to go to the end. So that was a long way of saying that was kind of step 1. Yeah. And then the challenge where I dropped to get the immunity clue, that was really my opportunity as well to gain even additional leverage over the rest over both Gary and Sam and the rest of my alliance, because at that point I had nothing. I could not, it really felt like there was no way that I was going to kind of forge any alliances with yellow. And I was kind of stuck with whatever Anessa and Louis wanted to do because they had the +1. So it wasn't like I was going to go behind Louis's back and be like, let's vote out and go to Mark and Eddie and be like, let's vote out your partners. They're never going to go for that. At least that was my feeling at the time. Anyways, that's kind of some of my initial thoughts. A lot to pick in, yeah.
I have a question for you, Hoy.
Yeah.
How long did it take? Did it linger? Did the feeling of playing this game and the backstabbing and the deception and the the game, did it linger with you? And if so, how long? And how did you wind up shaking it? Was it just time that allowed you to shake it? Did you
cry at work like Louis did?
I did not cry at work. I don't cry very often, for better or worse.
You haven't played Survivor Brooklyn South yet. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe then. No, I have almost exclusively positive experiences with this. So the only thing that I had to shake up was the intensity of kind of the endorphins of being in the game. At work, I would literally just want to like speed whisper to everyone, be like, "Oh my god, where's the next meeting?" Because it just became so kind of like permeated into my body. Yeah.
How did your expectations match up to your experience going into it? Because you go into this, your cast, your cast, and you have this sort of romanticized idea of what's ahead, and you have this idea of what kind of game you're going to play.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and the other part of that too is you had a very difficult journey with your loved one. We obviously Dan really wanted you to play, and we needed to find the person to play with you, and that was such an experience in itself. I think that's an important aspect of it too.
Yeah. Sorry, George. What was your first question? What was your initial question? But yes, Naomi, I do want to talk a little bit about that as well.
I think George is frozen.
Yeah, I think he's frozen.
George frozen.
But he's frozen in a lovely pose. I think it was just about right? Like what were your expectations going into
my
the
expectations.
game, and what did you anticipate being, such a fan and such a game player?
Yeah. I think certainly in terms of the game itself, there are certain checkpoints along the way that any fan wants to get to the tribe swap, the merge, make the jury, and ultimately get to the end. So all of those things was such a blessing and such a treat to be able to enjoy, to make it that far in the game. And I will say, like, because of the rest of the cast and the level of gameplay, so a lot of credit to the rest of my castmates. I loved playing with them. They just brought such an interesting environment, such a fun game, very stimulating. So it met my expectations and more, truly. A lot of that because of the cast and obviously because of you guys for organizing.
Yes, I mean, it was such a positive experience, I think, for everybody, which is such a privilege to have everyone walk away from the game feeling content. I know, Chris, you must feel the same way. It's just like it that's your goal, that's your dream.
Right. I think that's definitely what it is. I think the main thing is you want everyone to feel like, wow, I actually played Survivor, and something you think about and you have a memory of. And, producing these episodes are really, in part for me, but at the same time, this is something for you guys to hold on to for now the rest of your lives, that you can show somebody like 30, 40 years from now and be like, look what I did. Like, how cool was this? This was so much fun. So I'm glad that you've had that experience.
Just don't put it on your professional resume. That's all.
Yeah, that's the only thing. I definitely had somebody say, please don't put my last name in anything at all.
I understand. I don't want people watching me swear in Buffalo in my sweaty, dirty pants. Like, please keep my name out of it. And George, is there any other thought, especially because you watched a ton of episodes in a row, a thought about like the merge experience and like, because I think, Hoy, something that is very interesting is this merge, you literally had the most votes out of anybody in this merge, to a point where people like Gary are voting for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side, you come around and you last at least, 3 more votes, or is it 2 more? 3 more, because it's Pete, Sarah, and then Emily. George, I was curious what you thought about like this sort of 9 lives aspect of Hoy's game.
I mean, it's what made him a riveting player. It made him someone to watch and root for. Anybody that can crawl out from the bottom and last that many votes after their back was up against the wall deserves respect, and maybe even a shot on CBS. I mean, let's face facts here. It's not an easy thing to accomplish. So my hat's off to Hoy. And it was exciting to watch. I watched that, and I had the merge episode. I went back and started it over from the beginning and watched it again because there was so much to follow and and just keep track of, to make sure. I wanted to know how everybody voted and how we got to this point. And you lasted longer than I think many people would have suspected. So you played a great game.
Naomi, wasn't it like 22 votes total for Hoy in the span of 5 tribals? It's insane to me.
I tallied the number of votes people receive.
Susan votes for Hoy 5 times in a row. Emily votes for Hoy 4 times.
I counted 19.
And actually, Sarah votes for Hoy 3 times in a row.
It's pretty crazy, I would say.
So Hoy has, if you say that the votes negated by the idol don't count, he has 14 votes. But if you include those votes, he has 20 total, I believe.
That's impressive.
And 14 is the highest that anybody receives this season. Caleb is the second highest. Like Caleb receives 11.
Hoy has the most votes. Of any Survivor New York player through 1 through 3, Hoy has the most votes.
Who can we compare him to on the real show?
Karishma. Karishma had 22 votes, and she also got 8th place. She also got 8th place, so it's kind of in a 20-person season, so it's kind of iconic.
Hoy, you're the Karishma of Survivor New York.
I'm totally okay with that. I loved Queen Karishma.
Me too.
Do you love Applebee's too?
Oh my God, if Karishma loves Applebee's, no, I do not love Applebee's. Unfortunately,
did you come with us to Applebee's though?
I love Applebee's. I love Applebee's for all of the wrong reasons. Yeah.
Yes.
Hoy, I have a question. Okay, so going back to the swap, you pulled that chip with the X on it. You had the opportunity to choose your tribe. I never got a confessional as to your reason. I can assume what I want to assume, but I want to hear from you. Why did you go with that tribe versus the other tribe?
Good question.
Yeah. I think the decision was really deciding where my relationship with Josh was going to go. And ultimately, I picked what I felt was the right one because of the numbers, because I had already established a really good relationship with the purple that was there. So Anessa, Louis, Sam, and Gary.
And Sanchea too. Definitely.
And Sanchea, yeah, and Sanchea. Oh my God, bless Sanchea, I love her.
Yeah.
But if I went there, I knew for a fact that I was done. There was no chance for me to work with Josh, because that would have been a final nail in the coffin. I had already known and sensed up to that point that he was already feeling on the outs with me, and certainly I think with other purple. And so I think if I didn't go on Josh's tribe, it would have been over. And that meant that I needed to get Sarah out, who was going to be part of the swapped tribe. So I knew, I was like, okay, if I don't go with Josh, I'm going to be on a team with his teammate Sarah. And that's really kind of like where the genesis of all my like Sarah campaigning came from, because I didn't want Josh to potentially make the merge and team back up with Sarah, because in my mind, like I was burying any kind of opportunity with Josh if I didn't pick him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's kind of why. But ultimately, I chose the other side because of the numbers.
That's true.
Oh my God. I mean, I think that's a choice for anyone, especially considering that Emily and Susan are on the other side, and it becomes a tie, right? If he joins that side.
Well,
Exactly,
it depends.
yeah.
It depends on who Hoy would bump out of the tribe, because if he
that's
goes
right.
to the other tribe, he could essentially choose whoever he wants to leave.
Yeah.
So it could have created many different variables, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would have probably tried to break up a pair, but that did cross my mind. Like, could I maneuver my way around a tie situation? Also weighed on my mind. That's why it took so long for me to make the decision. Like, I could theoretically try to maneuver, really build a foundation with Josh, and hope that my relationship with Anessa, Louis, and Shea are all still tight if and when we make the merge again. But I was just like, fuck that, I'm too lazy, let me just go.
You know what? I think I'm actually thinking about the numbers here. I think it's quite funny because you having to wrangle Susan, Sandy, and Josh into an alliance would have been absolutely hilarious. And it would have been the biggest uphill battle.
Yeah.
Do you think...
Well, I was just saying, especially considering that the only person, so like, let's say you bumped someone like Eddie, do Anessa a favor, here, take your brother, or, you know, bump someone like Emily to say, Susan and Emily, I'm splitting you up. You have Pete, who is with Sam, and you basically, Katie is kind of the only non-pair in the game, so it's like, I don't know, let's vote Katie out? Like, it's weird. If you want to break up a pair, you could risk hurting Sam's feelings, or you could risk hurting Susan or Anessa's feelings, or you just vote for the single. So it's interesting, especially considering that tribe loses twice. So then what's the second move that you make, you know?
Yeah.
It's really a fascinating thought experiment in the hypotheses of it all.
Mm-hmm.
And speaking of Susan, I can't decide if this is the most incredible experience of Susan's life or if she's going to need therapy for the rest of her life. I haven't figured it out. She had a great time?
Yeah, she had a great time, and I think especially, she talks about it a lot, but getting to spend the time, and I think Sandy feels this way as well, getting to spend the time with your child, you know, especially I feel like I relate to this a lot, is like the time you get to spend with your parents when you move to New York City and you don't see them all the time, or even a sibling, you know, it is so cherished. And like, I think I've been watching a lot of Amazing Race, and this is why I know this feeling now, because everyone talks about it on the Amazing Race, right? Is like, yeah, I'm so glad I got to spend this time and spend this experience with my loved one. I don't care that we lost. I don't care that this happened. And I think that's why it's so interesting that they vote out Emily, and then they're like, oh, we're just going to vote out Susan. And then they don't. And I think it's even funnier that Susan essentially has to go through this game alone. And I was watching it. I was like, this is kind of messed up. Like, just give her some time with her daughter. Instead, you guys just separate her.
No, but it was clear that they both walked away from that game with their relationship being taken to a different level. once you experience something like that with a loved one, you know, you have something that nobody else has. Well, very few other people have. But it was very clear that they were very touched with each other's involvement in the game, and it seems like they will evolve as mother and daughter, which is great, which is priceless, really.
I mean, I'm still laughing. Like they both. I don't know if you saw last week, George or Hoy, but they both came to my house. I wasn't here, and they went in the school field. And Susan ran the track the correct way to give herself redemption. I mean, that to me speaks volumes about what the experience meant for
100%.
Yeah, Susan is amazing. She was a sweetheart on like during the game. I think anyone who played with her has nothing but love for Susan, a heart of gold.
I'd like to hit up Home Goods with Susan. I think that we go shopping with Susan. I think that she'll help me furnish my apartment. I don't know why. I just have a feeling she knows the deals.
And so on the other side of it, like you got Hoy lost Hung pretty early. Was there a part of you that, like, let's say we had done the, like, you know, hey, you can switch with your loved one twist, would you have done it, or were you just like, it's okay, I know she'll be fine, you know? Talk me through the emotions of losing someone pretty early, because I don't think we've had a lot of people who have had that experience.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll pick it up from another point, but I was actually originally supposed to play with the person who's now my ex. And so there were some complications there. So we got on the show first, but we broke up, and I had reached out to Chris and Dan. I was like, this is happening. I'm not really sure if it's like a smart thing for me to be playing with an ex, especially if it's just so recent.
Good TV.
Yeah.
Seriously.
I don't think I would ever want to emotionally traumatize someone that hard on this show.
And I'm thankful that happened, and that we decided to switch it up. And so that's just some context on how ultimately Hong joined the cast as my loved one. It's interesting. I would say, like, that was, I mean, growing up in my household, in a traditional Vietnamese household, at least for mine, sibling relationships were not guaranteed, is what I'll say. And then for us, typically, we were kind of formal, and if shit hit the fan, we'll be there. But, you know, we weren't regularly asking, oh, how was your day? And so having her agree to play this, drive down, and have this experience with her really did set an example. And it was one thing that I'll always look back to on, like, you know, this is something really cool that she did for me and with me. And, you know, as we get older, 32, like those moments are harder to come by. And so I appreciate them more as I get older. I think a lot of the time, especially with the context that I just gave, it feels like it's lost, and like you can't have your childhood back, or it's too late to forge some of these relationships.
So it's safe to say she's your favorite sibling, right?
She's one of my favorite for sure. Yeah, she's watching this. Yeah.
Just making sure. Just making sure.
So we're a lot closer now. Yeah.
That's really cute.
Yeah, it is. I love hearing that.
Yeah.
And you have 7 brothers and sisters total?
I'm the youngest of 10.
Youngest of 10. That's right.
Yeah. So it's really hard. I mean, it's just hard to have close relationships with all 10.
You never got the drumstick ever.
I never. Oh my God, I always got.
What number is Hong on the list of 10?
If I'm 10, she's 8.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
So we're pretty close. Yeah.
Was she the first sibling that you thought of, or was number 9 or 7 a potential, or was it Hong?
Yeah, I checked it with number 4. Number 4 said nah. Number 1, no. No, she was the first I asked, because I knew she would be the only one that would even say yes. The rest of them are families.
You should have had them run a relay race to decide.
Next time, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I loved about Hung too. Is she's such a world traveler. She really like cares and puts. You know, she's done so much that we get to see being Facebook friends and things like that over the years. That you're just like, she's so passionate about so many things that it is a really great choice to be your partner. And I remember you guys in the room while you guys were prepping to basically go in, like really talking, and you had so much to say and think about that. I was like, oh, I love this dynamic. I can't wait to see it play out. And it is a real shame that you guys didn't make the swap together, because I think that would have been very funny to watch.
I would have loved to play with her. I think truly, like, if I'm on this side of the extreme, she is on the exact opposite side. So she in many ways would have been my Susan. And I would have had to kind of like watch her and be like, are you like, don't say this, don't say that. This is who knows what. This is who knows what. So in some ways, it would have been a lot more work. I would have loved that anyway. I love a challenge. I love any kind of hairy situation, whether it's physical, whether it's strategic, whether it's social. So I would have loved that anyway. And for us, I think it would have been fun to have two powerhouse Asians just like really dominate. So yeah.
That brings up a good point. I want to talk about the queer person of color alliance because we never get the exact origin. We just kind of hear about it throughout the season, and we will still continue to hear about it until the end. So tell me about the origin and what it meant to you.
Yeah. Well, tactically speaking, it started the night before when we were split up into kind of the big tent and then the small tent. So I was in a small tent with my sister, Sanchea, and her partner, Serena. And we could not help but feel, I mean, maybe I'll speak for myself and I just projected this onto the rest of the tent, but I could not help but feel that like everyone is going to be like, let's just pick someone off from like the small tent over the night. That could not stop crossing my mind as much as I wanted to believe that no one was playing the game, no one was thinking about it. And so I was like, okay, if this is going to be the case, then I need to just double down on this. And like, and so we did talk a little bit that night, be like, what would it look like if we had an alliance that looked like this, this, and that? So that was kind of tactically where it started. But even before starting the game, I was in a place outside of the game where it was really important for me to come as who I am, as a queer Asian person, and to kind of be an existential, like, social justice kind of like warrior almost, in wherever I show up. And so it was really important for me to not just play the game well, but in wherever I could make sure that we were seen and that that we had a voice and that our brilliance was shown and that our beauty was shown and that our brawn was shown. All of those things was really, really, really important to me. And so it kind of just, I knew going in that I would want to at least try to do that. I think if that was the case, I could rally the troops in that way, and also have it stand for something really amazing that I care about a lot outside of the game.
Yeah, I mean, this was filmed 2.5 years ago, essentially. Like, we were smack dab in the middle of 2018, and a lot was going on. And I think I'm curious if when you got there and you saw, you know, all these people that Dan had brought and this cast that we had, that you were you worried coming in that it was like, oh, I'm going to be the only gay person, I'm going to be the only Asian person? At least you knew you had one because you're your sister. But was there that fear, and did seeing the cast almost allow you to open up more? Was that something that crossed your mind?
I typically am very comfortable in social settings, whether it's people I know at a party, at someone's birthday party, or just with complete strangers. So I'd like to believe, and I still would maintain, that regardless of what the room looked like, if it was a room full of all white people, if it was a room full of all men,
all men and hung,
that I would have been able to do two things: figure out some kind of maneuvering, figure out some kind of plan socially, and then in conjunction with that, find a place internally where if things don't work out because of the demographics of the cast, that I would still leave this experience as a whole person. I wouldn't let it detract away from me or anything like that. Luckily, that wasn't the case. It was such a diverse cast. So to answer the second part of your question, did it elicit any more confidence or comfort knowing that there are more? Slightly. I don't think it would have. I saw kind of everyone as competition, and yeah, to me, it was more about how everyone likes to play and how everyone is going to play versus what was the color of their skin, what was their gender, et cetera, despite wanting to also like form a queer POC alliance.
Well, I think it just goes to show that like diversity in Survivor casting, because this is something that obviously is on the forefront of literally every Survivor fan's mind at this point is like, it just gives people options. It gives people the potential. And it doesn't necessarily mean that anything is guaranteed to happen. It just means that you have a chance. And that's, I think, what is so great about this cast and about these people is that, like, it just meant that we could have the most gamers possible in our game and have a great sort of situation arise from that. And I love, I think overall, even if, it's not the overarching theme of the season or anything, the fact that a queer person of color alliance can be named, mentioned, and talked about and sort of have these very sort of talented players is like a success in itself. Whether or not any of them win the game, whether or not anything comes out of it, someone goes on to CBS and starts their own, like, it's still a success in itself that it existed.
And that's a direct tribute to Dan who cast this, and he did a great job. He did a fantastic job casting this show this season. Hoy didn't have to come in and worry that he was going to be the only person of color or a queer person. There was someone for everyone to relate to, and I mean, enhanced also because people were going in pairs as loved ones, but at the same time, the diversity really allowed for people to step outside of their bubble, possibly, and make connections with people that they sort of were in line with culturally and all that stuff. So that was great. I was very impressed with the casting.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I think just one last point on that is just that I think the different combinations of alliances that could have existed, I think, would have broken some conventional stereotyping when people watch Survivor. I think it's very easy. I've certainly noticed when like Francesca gets voted off first, or when like Jatia and like those types of players, women of color, tend to get voted before the first tribe swap, before the merge. And so it's easy to kind of surmise certain things about what could be, or even assume what could be driving factors on how people get voted off. And to both of your points, to have such a diverse cast kind of inherently remove some of those assumptions.
And Chris, one thing I was going to mention, I wonder, because you've seen so much footage now, is like it also opens the door for really interesting relationships that would not exist. Like, I think for you, Hoy, you and Sam were just this hilarious duo. You two cracking each other up with the idol clue, like being just, Sam's intensity, I think, really matched yours in a very fun way. And Chris, did you have anything like maybe thinking about these two that you wanted to talk about? I think we have to talk about the idol hunt itself, but
oh yeah, I mean, I think the relationship between the two of them is so unparalleled. It's like they just come from such different backgrounds, especially after the Charles vote. I mean, you guys don't see the full edit, but the conversation between Sam and Hoy was around 18 minutes long, just the two of them. And I had to kind of like break that down, and it's obviously a lot smaller, but it was just this combative like conversation where they're like, are we really good with each other? Are we not? And is Sam going to be able to work with Hoy? Does Hoy even want to work with Sam? But Hoy is so smart. He realizes that Sam is a big number in this game, so he doesn't just cast him to the side. He pulls him even closer. It's like sleeping with your enemy type of situation. And I mean, I will go down to say that I think Hoy is one of the smartest players to play the game. And I will definitely say, like, seeing that tribal council, I think it was definitely Louis, Hoy, and Senchea's doing. But I think that you've brought like great moments with Sam Hoy. And I think the idol hunt clue thing was top 3 moment that I've ever seen. And I would love to hear more of your thoughts on like how you were able to try and like wrangle Sam and to not run off and tell everybody the clue, and you telling him how to make something up, and it was just great.
First of all, I will say, like, I love Sam. I loved working with him and playing with him. And to what you guys just said, like, he is definitely not someone that I'm about to walk down the street and say hi to on a regular basis. So it was great to kind of interact and connect with someone like him. The idol clue, prior to that, I think I had put in a lot of work with Sam, and it's because I I liked Sam. I think he has this kind of similar energy to me, kind of very intense, very too kind of like to the point, and he says it like it is, except when he doesn't, and it's kind of your job to kind of figure out like when is he lying to me. And so I think that energy like really meshed with mine. The idol clue was probably like my top moment in terms of like experience. It was just so fun and funny. And I think what wasn't caught on camera was literally Sam and I had like we had to just excuse ourselves from just the game to just laugh, because at that point we were so tired, we were so delirious, just to see that this like idea that we just kind of made up on the spot could actually take off and serve the purposes that we needed it to, was satisfying in so many different ways. But it was just so goofy. It was just so goofy to see everyone lift up these logs on this clue that, you know, we just kind of just shat out of our asses. It was just like, under a log. And we just kind of ran with that. But I knew when I dropped it and Sam dropped it, that we in my mind, we were tied at the hip. Like, moving forward, we need to at least vote together for the next bit, possibly through to the end of the game, because we're sharing this clue. I don't see how we share a clue and then work against each other. And so to me, I needed to double down on my relationship with Sam. He was so quick to like, I need to run off and like find the idol and blah, blah. And I was like, the first thought that came into mind was like, Anessa and Louis, like, how I'm not about to allow them to have a chance to win immunity and then also get the clue. Like, why would I play myself?
Yeah. You know, Anessa says, I didn't notice everyone laughing. I was busy under a log. And I agree. I think that's like Sam is so one-track mind, and you have this sort of foresight to say, we only want Gary to know where the idol is. We don't want, you know, I think to a point, Nessa or Louis to tell Mark and Eddie, to tell Emily and Susan. Like, the information gets out very, very quickly, I think, because of that path of communication. And you're smart enough to say, no, let's make up some bullshit. And then they buy it. Yeah,
exactly. Anessa and Louis, closest allies. I know they're watching, but they had to go. I kind of still am shocked. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm shocked in a lot of ways that.
I have a question though, Hoy, because I don't know if it was you or Sam, but one of you guys said, I know exactly where it is. And then we get this great shot of you and Sam walking right past the idol, right past it. And
my best camera.
I mean, Naomi is just standing there probably in complete awe.
I was laughing my ass off.
Like, it was just so funny. So did you really know where it was? And then like tell me, because we don't have it on camera, like what happened from that point? You walk past the bucket, you tell everybody the fake clue. How does Gary get it first?
Yeah, so I needed to basically rein Sam back so that we can work on this fake clue. So in the moment, I think I was just saying, like, I already know where it is. You don't need to go find it. We're going to find it together. That was a lie. I had no idea where it was at the time, but I was going to say anything and everything to kind of slow him down. But Gary finds it first. And this is such a fascinating story, because this is probably like one of the reasons why I end up getting voted off and losing. I think if I were to do it again, I wouldn't have told Gary before I found it myself. And this was, I'll test this to maybe just being tired and sleep deprived. But I knew that I wanted to go to the end with Sam and Gary. To me, that was the only combination of three that would have allowed me to win. So working off of that assumption, I needed to bring Gary in, because interestingly enough, like after the Charles vote, I always sensed that there was like some distrust between Gary and I. I love him now, obviously he knows that, but in the game itself, even after Pete gets voted off and even after Sarah gets voted off, it never quite felt like Gary and I were as tight as I would have liked to be. All to say, as tight as I was with Louis, as tight as I was with Anessa, as tight as I felt with Sam. And so I needed this clue and this information to pull him in. He ends up finding the damn thing, which was not part of the plan. So I wish I could have just waited and just shared the information with him, and shared the fact that I had the clue. But I was doing a confessional, and literally I was thinking like bucket, bucket, bucket. I was saying, I don't know what I was saying. And then it suddenly clicked. was like, it's in that fucking well. And then I'm trying to like cut off this like confession. I remember thinking I need to like go to this well. So then after like maybe a minute, I bolt to the well, and there I already see Gary has it, and he's just putting it in his pocket. And that's how I catch him. Because I think he was trying to hide it from everyone, and I saw him because I was running to that same well because I knew that that's where it was. So I was like, damn it, oh my God. He found it before, but I obviously played it cool. I was not trying to demonize him. I was like, oh my God, this is so great. You found the clue. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Was in my head. I was like, God damn it. Why do you have the clue? So I was still playing to this idea that, like, yeah, we're going to work together. And I still was, but I was still just kind of like aggy about it.
Yeah. Well, and the funniest part of this all, I think, is just that, like, we should probably start telling people that they can take off during confessionals if they realize we're an idol. It's because, like, it's just better TV, right? Like, somebody goes, I gotta go, it takes off. But I think the funniest part is just essentially that Gary now has to run with like the idol in his pants, and he talks about it like a bunch where it's like, it is, he is struggling so hard to hide this idol, and like he's trying his darndest, and Gary and then Sam gets caught finding what is essentially an extra vote, which we haven't really talked about, but like neither of you guys can really like get anything done with finesse. It's always like somebody comes in and finds you at the last second.
Yeah. So I think to that moment, I think I was still set up, but I think that in combination with not really being self-aware enough that someone like Gary wouldn't want to take me to the end, in my mind, it was like, this made sense for all three of us. Like, why would you want to sit next to a yellow? I mean, Gary in this last episode mentioned that he would want to sit next to Susan and that he could potentially win against Susan. I still maintain that if a yellow makes it to the end, that they're going to get every single yellow vote on that jury. There's not a single except maybe for Sarah, who I do want to talk about as well. Sarah, that was another blind spot for me, I think, in the game. I didn't realize just how much of an island that Sarah was on. I thought that she was still very connected to Yellow. She had strong relationships with Mark, and that she really wanted Yellow to work. And so I thought in that way that like she wasn't really down to work with Purple, but especially not me. But a little more on that. But George, you were going to say something. Sorry.
Who would you have wanted to make it to the end with? Who would have been, of the people remaining, who would have been your ideal final three?
It would have been Sam and Gary.
Okay.
I think that was because, again, any yellow in my mind, any yellow that sits with me in the end is going to beat me. And then Anessa and Louis.
Is that just because they defied the odds and everything was stacked against them?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Is that reason enough? I don't know.
Well, there's four yellow votes on the jury. You have Katie, Sam, Emily, and Sarah. Now, you could feasibly think that Pete votes for his loved one, and then you have 3 votes. But I think that Susan votes with Emily, so that's 4. And then what's the rest of the jury? So, there's... I'm not good with math. I'll come back with this.
Yeah.
But to be fair, also with Hoy, like, not only are Eddie and Mark essentially threats to get Yellow's votes, but they're also going to have, let's say if they're on the jury, let's say you get rid of Louis and Anessa, they're going to have Louis and Anessa's votes guaranteed. So, like, that's another factor is, like, the loved one vote and, especially for a person from the original Yellow tribe, I think they have a pretty good chance. I'm going to look at numbers right now.
For me, that was the case. For someone like Louis, for example, I think he can win against a yellow or an Anessa. They can win against a yellow. For me, that wasn't the case because my read on the jury, and we hear it in Emily's in one of her confessionals this episode, is that it's not just going to be a purely who was the most strategic, who played the best game. She mentions it in this episode, like she thinks that a lot of the members of the jury, I think this is actually the prior episode, a lot of the members of the jury don't have a favorable kind of perception of Anessa. She mentions that 2 episodes ago. And so I shared that kind of read of the jury. It wasn't just going to be how hard I played and how intense I played. Then there was going to be some element of, did I make a relationship? Did you like me? And so working under those assumptions, I had to get rid of every yellow because that first merge vote was, 9 votes Hoy or whatever it was. And so it was very difficult for me to come back from that try and be like, oh, hey, Sarah, like, what do you like to do? Like, tell me about yourself. Like, it was more just like, I need to get everyone out. There wasn't a lot of room. And I think what viewers don't necessarily see in this kind of Survivor is that, we don't have, we don't actually have a week in between tribal to kind of mend relationships and foster all these things. We have minutes. We have 20, 30 minutes to make something happen. And so the effort to build trust and then believe in that trust felt very unlikely for me in that time span. So I had to work with what I got, so to speak. So that's what I meant when I don't have a lot of leverage. Louis, I think, and people like Anessa, they have ins to Yellow. There are more conversations with Yellow. They can crack jokes. Oh, like Louis, and he's hilarious. Love Louis and Anessa. So they have a lot more and had a lot more room to kind of play that game up than someone like me and other people.
Right. Especially because we're so close to the final three. We're so close to the end. And it's basically going to be hours. And you don't have the time in a few hours to like perfectly plan your end game and make it happen. Which is one of the most interesting parts of, I think, Survivor New York is how on the second day, everything basically snowballs and then bam, there's a final three. Like, it just, everything kind of goes out of control. And then, hey, here's your final three. Okay, you're going to vote for them now. Rather than sort of the calculated choices that people get to make in a real Survivor game, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to talk a little bit about Sarah, and I think I love Sarah. I think she was one of the best competitors. I do think I had a missed opportunity at Final 10. That was the episode that Sarah got voted up at Final 10 with Sarah and Emily. I wish we had talked. I think I could have potentially rallied Sarah, Emily, and Susan as a voting block of 4, get the other 6 to believe that we're going to split the vote on Sarah and someone else, and then it will be 3-3, and then the 4 of us could have done something. Again, this is kind of to the point you just made, Naomi. Watching it back, it's so easy to just have 2020 and like, oh my God, if I was just in my right state of mind and like the dynamics of the tribe worked like this, and I had already some trust with Sarah and Emily. That could have very much been possible, and I think it would have certainly changed the direction of the game than where it is now. But I mentioned that because I think if and when I play again, I'm going to be much more open to working with my enemies, however direct, however intense that enemy was, and however recent that enemy was. I need to kind of be open to the idea of potentially working with them is a learning that I got from this.
Watching the season back, whose game surprised you the most compared to your perception of when you were out there playing? Who surprised you the most out of all the people in the game?
The first person that comes to mind is Sam. In talking with him, it felt that he was a little bit all over the place. And to an extent, like he is a little bit all over the place, but I think he had a very good instinct on the game, more so than I gave him credit for while I was playing with him. I think he
knows exactly who's in his alliance.
Yeah. He read the room and he read the threats probably slightly better than I thought that he did in the actual game. Because I was surprised he went against me. I was like, what was that?
Yeah.
I was gagged. Both by Sam and Gary. I was like, what the hell would you do that for? How am I that? So I think that surprised me. And so Sam's game surprised me. Inessa's game also surprised me.
More on that. Let me pop some popcorn. I'll be right back.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in the game working with her, I always felt like I could ultimately trust her. And she and I had conversations about this. But I felt that she was a little bit too paranoid for the kind of game that would have made me a lot more, that would have allowed me to kind of maneuver a little bit more. I think when you have someone someone as intense and someone as smart and someone as strategic and someone as paranoid all in one package, I find that I have to kind of keep working on that relationship to make sure that it's okay, because if it's not okay, then I know what she's capable of, and I know that she's going to spin off and do something crazy because she's so smart. And so I am surprised watching back how just how strategic she was. I kind of characterized her game in the moment more as paranoid, but there was a method to the madness that I am only seeing now, watching an edited version and watching all of the bits and pieces come together. But in the moment, it felt a little bit more like you're giving me everything, and I need to know what you are thinking. You're giving me like what everyone is thinking and what the 5 different Nessas are thinking, but I need to know what you are thinking. And I think watching this through, there was a linear kind of explanation to her game so far.
That's why she's always Cass. She's a good addition to these games because of every single thing that you just said.
Yeah.
I'm an Nessa fan.
I agree.
And Chris, something that Hoy, what this brings up to me, you talking about working with Emily and Sarah earlier on, is what Emily talked about last week, Chris, which is voting out Eddie. Hoy, is that something you would have done? And maybe Chris, you can, if you have thoughts on this, is that something you would have done to weaken Anessa possibly? Is take out her ally? Like, is that something you're thinking about?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking both Mark and Eddie, they had to go for physical threats. And because, again, the whole yellow thing, I think.
But why didn't Mark go, though? That's the question, I think.
That's a very good question, Chris.
Like the whole episode, Mark does not come up the entire time, even though he's a physical competitor, but Susan comes up.
Right.
Like, I mean, I would assume it's because Anessa and Eddie do have a deal with Mark and Louis, so they don't want to screw him over, so on and so forth. But if you, Gary, Sam, and Susan just come together and say, we're going to stay 4 strong in this, Anessa, you and Eddie have to come, or we're going to go to a tie, I think Anessa does come with you guys, and then Mark is out. And I think it would have worked because I think Anessa would have known logically, like, Mark is a competitor, and that would have been the best move at the time.
We're going to have a fan vote for Mr. Spectacular between Mark and Eddie, and we'll see who wins.
The reason why for that, and you bring such good points, Chris, is with the advantages that I knew of, which was the idol in Gary's pocket and the extra vote with Sam, I was working on the assumption that we were locked. Again, an error, potentially an error, a fatal error that the 3 of us were locked. But we've seen the confessions that they also, like, both Sam and Gary feel that this is a good final 3 for them, at least up until last episode. And with those advantages, this is how it was going to do that. At final 8, it was Susan going to go. That leaves us to final 7. Then we would have played an idol to get to final 6, and we would have gotten who was going to get voted off to play the idol. That would have, assuming we correctly played the idol on one of us or whoever will vote off, then an Eddie or a Mark to get them up. And then at final 6, we would use Sam's extra vote to get to a final 5, and that final 5 we're 3 against 2, and then we just eliminate the rest of them. So that was my pitch. That was my strategy in just talking with Sam and Gary and pitching them. Do you want to do a final 3? This is how we get to final 3 without needing Susan, without needing anyone else. We don't need to worry about anyone else. We have 2 advantages in the 3 of us, and this is how we're going to get to the end. And I think that was one of the reasons why it was so appealing to Sam and Gary. And that's why they bought into the final 3 with us 3, was that we didn't need anyone else with those 2 advantages.
Yeah.
But to your point, like, we could have saved those advantages and used Susan while she was still there, 2020 vision and all that. But truthfully, that was never going to happen. Susan was never going to vote with me. She was never going to be like, okay, let me vote off Mark. let me vote off Eddie. That was, I felt like she was never going to vote off a yellow before she voted off me in particular.
But why do you think that, though? Because, I mean, you did spend time with her in the pre-merge section of the games. I mean, you did have a relationship with her before she did with Mark and with Eddie. So, like, what went wrong with Susan in that relationship? Is it Emily or?
Nothing went wrong with it. We had wonderful conversations, Susan and I. But I think maybe it was Emily just saying you can't trust Hoy. I suspect that probably has a lot to do with it. And insofar as Susan is going to listen to whatever Emily says, which has explicitly been mentioned as something that happens, and I think that was kind of the dynamic, at least strategically, at least in terms of gameplay. Susan was going to do whatever Emily says.
Right.
And so for both Anessa and I, and I'm curious to hear what Anessa thinks, that was not where I was going to invest my time at that point. If I had 30 minutes to get something done, I was not going to be trying to talk to and convince Susan.
Yeah. Anessa says that Susan was super into Mark, but she could have voted off Eddie to weaken me. And I do think that is a good point, is I think that Susan had a very, very strong relationship with Mark and Louis. And I think that was never going to happen. Because also, of course, we remember that Eddie and Mark were on her swap tribe with Emily. And so I think that part of it is like probably the gratefulness of like, you guys didn't vote me out when I messed up a challenge. You guys, you kept me in the game with my daughter. Things like that sort of stir up the more emotional sides of people, especially Susan. Definitely have a contributing factor. And then she does vote for you 5 times in a row, which is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say about Susan, I still maintain that she, at least for my game, she would have beat me at the end. I think she's getting painted as this very non-strategic player, and kind of just this lovely angel who's just here to play with her daughter, which is beautiful to see. But I still maintain that I think because of my lack of relationships with Yellow and because of how strongly I felt in the moment, let me take that. It's like I still think that she, like Emily, would not have been the only vote that she would have gotten. If it was a final 3 with me and Susan, I think she would have gotten a Pete, and then maybe Pete will convince Sam to vote for her, and then maybe a Katie. Because I basically had no relationship with Katie, Pete, Sarah. I did have a relationship with Sarah, but it was an extremely antagonistic relationship. And so it didn't feel like Susan was also beneficial to my game. She wasn't really going to work with me strategically. It's very hard to get a vote out of her. And she was just going to potentially beat me in the end. So it made sense for me to just vote her off anyway. So yeah, that's kind of the thinking behind why I didn't necessarily pull in Susan.
Yeah. Chris, as we're wrapping up, what are your sort of concluding? Chris always has lots of concluding questions, which I love. You always think of the things I never do.
Hoy is such a good talker because I feel like that we didn't really have to ask him questions. He gave us all the dirt, but I loved the way that you performed in the challenges. Like when it was you versus Eddie and you won that immunity for your tribe, I just thought you were great. Like you were such a fast runner in that running challenge. I was impressed by your physical ability, because I think one of the stigmas that we get as like gay men is like, oh, we're not super physical, we're not super strong, we're not super good at challenges. But I think you were like super well-rounded in all of those aspects. So that was just like a little thing I wanted to say.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
I don't think we've seen the last of Hoy.
Hopefully not. Yeah, hopefully the next time I play, I'll be a little bit more. You'll just have to wait and see.
You have to wait.
The buff will be a headband now. The buff will really just be holding back the flow. I can't wait. We'll do like photo shots of you like flipping your hair. It'll be awesome.
Maybe. Yeah. This is my little COVID project. It's never been this long, so we'll see how far it goes.
Or do you think you could do well on the show? Would you actually go out for the real show? Do you think you could do it?
I would. I think I would do. I don't know how I would do. I think. What
about the elements? You think you could last those 39 days?
I think so. Yeah. It'll be brutal, but the elements certainly. Yeah.
What about waking up? What about sleeping that night? I mean, my game is one day and you're done. You don't have to wake up the next morning and think about it. With this game, you have to go to sleep and wake up in the game. I'm curious. How is that night of sleep?
It was pathetic. No one slept. Nobody slept. It was pointless, really. We should have just went with a hashtag better TV, just no sleep. It's just a straight 36 hours.
Make it a challenge. Whoever goes to sleep. Anyway.
Yeah, sleeping was not easy. Because our game, I'll speak for myself, my mind was running. It was just, I was dreaming strategy.
It was also cold, if I remember correctly. Like, we've realized this since, but like, it gets pretty cold at night, and I don't think we told you guys to bring enough to be
Yeah.
warm. And so like just when you're cold and you're like, oh my God, why do I do this to myself? It just reaches a point where your brain is like, I'm gonna get mad and turn off.
And it was like super rainy, and we weren't expecting it to be so rainy.
Yeah.
So that like it really threw a curveball in the game, I think.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It started rough because it was raining at night before we started. So everyone was kind of wet. I mean, wet socks is literally like the last thing anyone wishes for to start.
Yeah.
anything. So yeah.
Yeah, and then we absolutely destroyed the morale of our season 4 tribes by making them get their shoes wet again, which was like a mistake, but I felt really bad about that when that happened. But you know, we got to keep people miserable. It's not all fun and games here on Survivor New York.
Exactly.
It's a little bit of tears,
True.
a little bit of crying. So Hoy, would you ever play Survivor New York again? Like I think I know the answer to this, but would you?
I would love to. Yeah, I think I'm curious to how I do again, especially if it's with people who have seen me. I think returning players and people who know of returning players are always introduce a different element to the game. And there is now, 4 seasons of Survivor New York. Chris and George, you've also been doing South Brooklyn. So there is a little bit of a under kind of culture, a subculture of Survivor fans. So I don't know where or how or if I rank on that. If I were to play again, I prefer that people like have no idea who I was. I think that is typically how I would like to enter a game. But even if they do, it'll be fun. It'll be exciting to see how I kind of what people's perceptions are of me, and then how I can kind of work with that and maneuver around and with those things. So yeah, I'd play again.
I knew you'd say yes.
Yeah, I have a crown to take. I feel like I am typically not satisfied until I win, so I'll just keep doing it until I win.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. George, any final thoughts? Just like, is there anybody else that you're rooting super hard for now that someone like Hoy and people like Sarah are out of the game? Do you have a fave?
Well, as an older guy myself in a world full of 20-year-olds, I am rooting for my man, Sam. I love Sam. Sam is, if I had the power, I would put Sam on CBS tomorrow, and along with Pete. Those two are fantastic, and I root for those guys. Pete absolutely drove me to ugly cry when with his parting words. It was very touching and hit close to home, because I sometimes feel that way in this community, because I'm a relic. But I think that I can't wait to see how this plays out, and I think it's going to be a really, really interesting finish, because you got some fierce competitors in those final. And now what are we down to 7?
We're down to 7.
7 is when this game really starts now. No offense, Hoy, but 7 is when the shit hits the fan, usually, if you get a good season. And I have a feeling that that's what we're going to see on Friday.
Yeah,
you hit it on the nail, definitely. I mean, for sure.
I want to add, there is, I don't know if you've seen advertised in all the Survivor groups, but Sari Fields is having a Zoom holiday party, and there's a slew of A-lister survivors who will be there. It's on December 19th at 5:30 p.m. Tickets are $40, and it's going. Part of the proceeds are going to go to charity, which is going to help Sunday Berquist, who is going through another bout of cancer. And we're trying to get as many people possible. We're going to have trivia. We're going to have there's going to be survivors competing against each other with puzzles, and donated from this person who replicates Survivor. What's the name of the?
That would be Outplay Puzzles.
That's it. Outplay Puzzles. And you got Shane Powers, who's going to be there. I mean, when was the last time you had FaceTime with Shane Powers? But I strongly suggest any Survivor fan to spend a couple of hours with us and get your Survivor fix. It's been too long. And the last thing I want to say, I just want to say Survivor Brooklyn South Game 4 is on the horizon. We're going to hope that, the positivity rate goes down and everybody's comfortable by the time May comes around. But I do have a cast, and I can't wait to get this game in the can.
And I will be there, George.
I will be there.
I will be there.
Hoy, I need you on crew, Hoy.
Okay, yes.
It's already cast.
So I think that's a great point to say. Get vaccinated if you want to play Survivor New York Season 5. And wear your masks. And the other part of this is obviously we have episode 12 airs Friday at 7 p.m. And then episode 13 is our finale. So things are going to kick off. And is there anything, Chris, you want to preview about the next episode to come? Anything exciting that's going to go down in episode 12?
2 people are going to be going home. So that it's going to be a big episode. And both votes, I think, are huge. I think they're blindsides. I think, like George says, 7 is the time to make moves, and people are here to do that.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Absolutely. And I would say also on top of that, if you thought season 34 was not game-changing, I think this episode alone will be. So tune in and please support us on social media, Instagram and Facebook, especially YouTube subscriptions are a great way to get people to pay attention to us. Sharing us on Reddit, on Twitter, on any social media to say that we fill the survivor-sized hole in your heart is very helpful to us. And if you want to play Survivor New York, you can go to tinyurl.com/SNYcasting. We are going to cast a game eventually when it's nice and safe and we can all hug and kiss and talk to each other and whisper in our ears. And I think most importantly is just subscribe and connect to Live Reality Games on Facebook, because that's where you're going to get all your live reality game news. If you don't want to play Survivor New York, fine. But if you want to play a different game, there's lots of casting info. There's lots of interesting opportunities to check out, new games to follow, Big Brother, Amazing Race. Like, it's crazy how much is going on in the live reality games world, even in COVID times. So thank you, George, for joining us. Thank you, Hoy, for joining us. It is such a treat to catch up with you two, and it's been a real pleasure to relive this journey with you, Hoy, but it's been even more of a pleasure to just be your friend in general. So thank you guys for being here. It really has been so much fun. And I guess that's it. Inessa has to say, I think the log and fog hint comes back in full force, which I think is a great preview for episode 12. So
can't wait.
With that, good night, everybody. I'm gonna
good night,
everyone.